Newcastle United host Brighton on Saturday, and you know what that means. Yankuba Minteh is back at St James's Park, or playing at St James's Park for the very first time. In this video, I'll look at why he left and whether Newcastle United will live to regret it. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video, to another match preview. The Premier League returns after 2 weeks of the international break. Newcastle United hosting Brighton on Saturday. And obviously we're going to talk about Yankuba Minteh because this is a story that has felt like it would come back to bite Newcastle from the moment that he left to join Brighton in the summer for £33 million. Obviously everybody knows why he left. It was part of a PSR trolley dash, if you like, in the opposite direction, trying to get players out to deal with a shortfall. We went into all the details about that in the summer, in the Monday and the Thursday show. With him coming to St James's Park at the weekend, with him playing at Newcastle for the first time, it's back on people's lips. The narrative is there. Will he haunt Newcastle United on Saturday? And also, you know, how much will Newcastle live to regret the decision to sell him? Well, ultimately, there's two schools of thought that are the same as they were back in June. Newcastle have not dealt with this situation for a long time. They had a £70 million shortfall, and Minteh's sale was in the end paramount to them dealing with it. Otherwise they would have had to look at other sales like Gordon, for example, like possibly Bruno. There was real consequences to a decision that they made in the summer, and that was that Minteh went to Brighton for £33 million a year after joining from Danish side Odense for £7 million before a stellar year on loan at Feyenoord. He started really well at Brighton, and I also think that the context around what he would have been at Newcastle changed very much given what happened in the summer, the lack of transfer activity, and what his standing would have been at Newcastle. It was interesting, we talked about it last summer, and for a bit of context, I think Newcastle had understood or decided that they maybe needed to sell to cash in on Minteh at the back end of last season, or the second half of last season, when his form was fantastic for Feyenoord. I think it was 15 goal contributions in all competitions off the top of my head. Really did well for Arne Slot's side and impressed. And the irony of the situation, actually going back to when he signed, was it was very much a Dan Ashworth sort of deal, and sort of the idea of, not that Dan Ashworth was a major driver of the recruitment, we know this, but the thing that he was bringing in was a sort of an ethos of looking to the future, and Minteh was seen as somebody who Brighton could have gone for, ironically, and obviously now he plays for Brighton and has started very, very well for them under Fabian Hürzeler. But the fact that many people thought that he was going to be a substitute right winger behind a major signing, and that was the ideal situation. He would learn off a more experienced or bigger name, if you like. That was the dream at the start of the summer. By the end of the summer, it was quite clear that he would have been an upgrade on what Newcastle already had. Fact is that they didn't upgrade, and they haven't upgraded that right midfield situation since the takeover. It's still Jacob Murphy as first choice and Miguel Almiron as second choice, with Harvey Barnes possibly out there as well as another option. And this is the situation. I think, unfortunately, Yankuba Minteh's stock in terms of Newcastle has risen from the moment that he left. And again, the context being that not selling him would have left them in real dire situation. So there is that context. But the fact that he's coming to St James's Park this weekend with a point to prove is not good for Newcastle, and that narrative will be all around, and a lot of Newcastle fans have feared this moment. And as soon as he started really well with that fantastic performance on the opening day at Everton, he's not really looked back. He scored a goal against Tottenham in a 3-2 win for Hürzeler's side before the international break. He's coming into this game in good form, and he'll definitely have a point to prove. I think from his perspective, he wasn't treated particularly well. The move to Feyenoord, the fact that he got moved to a Champions League club and played such a starring role for them last season, suggested that his development and readiness for a first team football at Newcastle was a lot quicker than maybe a lot of people thought initially. The fact that he was sort of touted around, and obviously a deal was agreed with Lyon before he went to Brighton. He didn't want to go there. He wanted to stay in the Premier League. It was all very impersonal from his perspective. I don't think him and his camp were particularly happy, as you can imagine. So he'll come to St James's Park with a real point to prove, and that is a big worry for Newcastle. Unfortunately, the reality of this situation is that Newcastle have let slip one of the best gems that they could have possibly signed. You know, this era has been defined by the big name signings, the Isaks, the Brunos, the Botmans, the Gordons. But as we've seen the irony of what we've seen this summer is that Newcastle are going to look further afield. They're going to try and scout out the untapped markets. Well, they did that with Minteh. They found a gem. They bought him for a cheap price, £6.5–7 million last summer. And yes, they got a massive profit on a player that never played for them once. Absolutely no-brainer in the circumstances at the time as well. But the fact is that he would have saved them a lot more money down the line as well. You know, if he'd come in and they'd said he was going to be the right midfielder from the start of the season, you can focus on signing another striker or a centre-back, then, you know, the team would look a lot stronger, and that's just the reality. And as I say, he looks very much at home at Brighton. It's not a surprise because he was very much that type of signing. The fact that Newcastle found a gem of a player in a market that nobody saw. That's very much what Brighton have done and made a model out of doing over the last 5 or 10 years. And that's unfortunately where Newcastle have let themselves down in this situation because of the financial fair play and the PSR situation. They didn't deal with it, and Minteh was the collateral damage. As I say, it's a shame because he was seen as a substitute at the start of the summer and somebody who could come in and maybe make an impact as a squad player, as a fringe player, and maybe develop into something. But I think now, if you look at the first team picture, you do a combined 11 between Newcastle and Brighton. Yankuba Minteh is on the right hand side of midfield, undoubtedly, and that's just shows where Newcastle have unfortunately gone wrong with this. So he will be in the mood to threaten Newcastle in this game, and it's going to be a huge undertaking for whether it's Lloyd Kelly or Lewis Hall on that side to keep him quiet. But I actually am fairly confident that Newcastle can get a result out of this game. It's at St James's Park. That is a fortress. They've only lost once this year, and that was to Manchester City all the way back in January. And they seem to have a style and an identity at home. Away from home, as we've spoken about so many times on this channel, I've spoken about it as well on True Faith. It feels a little bit different, but at St James's Park, they should be confident. Herzl said in his press conference earlier today, I'm recording this on Thursday afternoon, that they will come to St James's Park and attack. They will not sit back. They have done that in previous games. They were caught out badly at Chelsea. They were caught out badly in the first half against Spurs as well. Newcastle are very good with transitions. They can allow Brighton to have a little bit of the ball. They can control the game in that way themselves as well. Hit them on the counter-attack, exploit the space in behind that midfield. That's exactly what Brighton will leave. They've left it in so many games before. They have a high line with not particularly quick centre-halves. If Isak and Wilson, who are both supposedly fit for this game, are back, then Newcastle can play on the shoulder as well there. There's a lot of accessibility into that defence, if you like, for Newcastle. So I think that this is a game that suits them stylistically, and I think Newcastle can go and do Brighton some damage. Last year there was a little bit of a disappointing result in that draw at the back end of last season when Brighton came and frustrated Newcastle a little bit, and it cost them Europe in the end. Towards the end of that season, they drew that game, lost to Manchester United a few days later, and ultimately they missed out on the top six and ultimately Europe. So there's a score to settle, even though it's a different Brighton side. This is a Brighton side that still has that same cavalier attitude to going forward, and they are sort of very much set in their ways and their principles, which is greatly to be admired, but at the same time gives Newcastle a huge opportunity to get in behind them, and I think that will suit them at St James's Park. Newcastle will be the ones who have the intensity and the energy, and also they are stronger at sitting a bit deeper. With Tonali in the team, they have that control in the midfield. They can play through the lines a bit more and also hold their compactness in the middle, but also with Burn and Schär, they've good at sitting deep and sort of stopping the space in behind, which is something that Brighton won't do. So tactically, I think this game does suit Newcastle quite a lot. But obviously there is this sort of jack in the box and the trump card potentially for Brighton, and all the narrative around Yankuba Minteh that could be really interesting and one to watch. I think he's going to be up for this one. Really is a reminder of the disappointment that Newcastle have missed out on a player that would have absolutely improved this team straight away. One of the best young players in Europe by all accounts, especially on last season's form, and a huge shame. And 33 million was a great deal at the time. It was a necessary deal at the time, but ultimately I wonder if this is going to look like a poor missed opportunity for Newcastle, because that was the one opportunity, it was the one time that they found one of these gems in an untapped market, as I said earlier, and that's what they want to do now. That's what Paul Mitchell is trying to implement. They're trying to find ways around PSR, and Minteh proved his worth in that sense to Newcastle, both as a cheap option who could come in and develop, which he obviously, I have no doubt he would be Newcastle's starting right midfielder, as I said, but also as a great way to gain profit as well. It shows that the the system works. Newcastle have got to hope that Minteh does not come back to haunt them. It could be a very interesting game. I think Newcastle have got a good chance of winning this one. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But Yankuba Minteh is the unknown, if you like. He is the one where all the narrative will be around, and how he plays could have a direct impact on the result. Thank you very much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below what you think, and I'll be back on Sunday afternoon, I think, with a live reaction, or Sunday evening potentially. I'll see you next time. Cheers.